Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much. We will wait for every other person to join. We're excited that you have joined us. My name is 𝗕𝗿𝗄. I am the founder of DPO African Network, and today is our webinar. We have this webinars monthly, and we are excited to have you here. Please, while we wait for our panelists to come on stage, please kindly let us know where you're joining us from Nigeria, from Senegal, from Zimbabwe, South Africa. Where are you joining us from? Would love to know. Please put it in the chat. Also, if you're open to connecting, put your LinkedIn URL. You just might never know who you will be connecting with today. So please let us know. We have an exciting array of events today, so I cannot wait, but let us wait for others to trickle in while we get these webinars started. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who are joining us repeatedly, month in, month out, we want to say thank you. Thank you for being consistent, because all of your engagement means a lot to us, because as we continue to strengthen the ecosystem, we rely on your participation. So thank you so much. Awesome. Awesome. I see people coming in. This is exciting. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'll give you a second and we will get right into this. Okay, as we get started, it's important that I read out the disclaimer for today's event. This is a tabletop event, so it's important that we are aware of this. Please, 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 DPO African Network is pleased to host this panel to facilitate discussion among industry experts. This session is for general informational, educational, and awareness purposes only. Each panel participates strictly in their personal capacity. Views, opinion, experiences, and commentary are those of the individual panelists and do not represent or bind their employer, client, or affiliated organization. Information shared is not legal, regulatory, financial, or other professional advice and should not be relied upon as substitute for advice from an appropriate qualified professional. We make reasonable effort to make this information accurate and current. However, no representation or warranty is made as to accuracy, completeness, currency, or suitability. Laws, regulation, guidance, and circumstances may change. So treat these as informational and educational purpose only. Again, in today's session, it wouldn't be only the panelists having this conversation. We want you to participate, and so we will be having decision cards as we go along, because we're simulating a live scenario. We would ask you questions and we will want to get your response. It would be a poll. We're not going to show the names, or we will see the percentage and see where people lean towards in this percentage. So that will be coming up as we go along. So right now, let us bring in our panelists as they make their way on stage, turn on their camera and unmute so that we can get started in here. But before we get started, it's important to know that a modern data breach is never just about privacy alone. It can simultaneously become a cybersecurity incident, regulatory matter, legal challenge, operational disruption, reputational crisis, and board-level concern. Today we will unpack this, but before we go along, we want to meet the individuals, these experts behind the scene. And so with that, I would want to introduce our panelists, Tulani Mashini. We also have Dr. 𝗕𝗿𝗄𝗰, and we also have 𝗕𝗿𝗆 Chitapi. They will be discussing with us today. Before we put our panelists into a crisis situation, we want you to meet the people behind this expertise. And so we would be welcoming our panelists and asking them to give us 2 minutes version of their career journey. how did you find your way into the work that you do today? So I'd welcome Tulani is up here. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is 𝗕𝗿𝗄. I am an information security leader. I started with my career as a researcher, and as many people or people I've known, security really does find you. So I thought I was going to be a developer. I ended up here, and my curiosity in regards to how technology actually influences people. And then that grew to how security influences how people's behaviors change and how people actually react to the security controls that we put in place. That's what got me here. Thanks.
Awesome, awesome. Zubeida.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm 𝗕𝗿𝗲𝗰𝗵, and I started off my journey. I wouldn't even say I waited for university. Before that happened, I already started doing vacation work. I really loved working with computers, all the time. So I started doing vacation work with a great research institute. And from there, I just grew to love how systems work, how things can work or break. And I really enjoyed, I think, not knowing things. So I then pursued research, and then I went to further levels of research until I completed my PhD. So this was a few years ago, before I would say LLMs and generative AI. But I still liked AI, so I did more a focus on semantic web technology, and I found it really interesting how to apply these technologies into helping, I think, South Africans as well as other Africans to solve some of the issues regarding cybersecurity and awareness and all of that. So eventually, it led me here to where I am today. I am a senior solutions engineer, and I help organizations technically to get things to work together with their data and get like really good insights for specific use cases. So that's me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Zubeida. That's awesome. Mpo, what do you have to say?
Thank you, Amaka. It's such a pleasure to be here this evening. Good evening, morning, afternoon to everyone on the call. Much like Tuli, I think my profession found me. I had no idea what technology, media, and telecommunications law was. When I started out, all I had was Legally Blonde and Suits as a reference. And I delved into this exciting universe of TMT law, and I really embraced it from the get-go. I read up as much as I could on it. I worked in big law in South Africa. I worked with really some of the leading industries, petrochemical industries, financial services, telecoms, but focused mainly on the technology aspects of their business. And so I decided, it was an area that I wanted to specialize in right from the get-go. I worked in big law for a while, and then I transitioned to the financial services sector, where I currently am right now. And it remains an extremely exciting space for me. I work with a lot of technology suppliers in and around financial services. No 2 days are the same, really. And I'm excited about, what emerging technology is bringing to the fore for us, the different ways we need to be evolving, thinking about issues like data privacy, AI, the rights of individuals, and even human rights as we move forward. I think there is a greater call upon humanity, to exercise judiciousness in how we enter the future. That's a bit about me. Thank you.
Mpo, we'll stay with you for a second. Just looking at the wealth of experiences that you've garnered over the years, knowing what you know today, what would you have done differently earlier in your career? Because we have those who are really aspiring on the call today. So, what would you have done differently? Or you might think about this question of what advice would you give to someone building a career in their field today? Take it away.
Sure. I don't know what I might have done too differently, But I would certainly say I think I was very hard on my younger self, coming into the space, not knowing what I don't know. And so I think I tended to be very hard on myself, very doubtful, very quiet, in rooms where I really thought I could have come out a bit more, shone a bit more. And so my advice is that, if you're in the room, you're as qualified as you need to be. Run with it, embrace it, prepare, always be prepared for meetings. Come in and give it your all.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Zubeida, I will go over to you. Was there a particular experience, person, or opportunity that significantly changed the trajectory of your career?
Sure. You're really asking the hard questions today. Yes.
We haven't even
So,
gotten started, so go take it
yeah,
away.
yeah. I think there are. And for me, what changed the way I viewed things was to see how people in my own community were affected by my work. And I'll give you maybe a practical example here. So we had an election campaign. We had the elections rather in South Africa, and there was a big campaign about fake news and misinformation. And I am always the kind of person to share information with elderly people about what's happening, what to be wary of, deep fakes, be careful. So as usual, I kept sharing this information. And at the end of the campaign, my dad still sent me like a proper fake video. And I thought to myself, okay, am I doing all this for nothing? But for me, it made me just reflect and say to myself, what can we do differently? How can we truly bring what we do every day and help strengthen the communities? It's no point in me only focusing on helping large organizations to reach their strategic goals and to keep the shareholders happy. But I just wanted to go a little bit wider than that. So I think that was like a significant turning point for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Zubeida. Tilani, let's begin to wrap up this particular section with you. I want you to tell us what really excites you about this journey, about this career path. What keeps you going? What do you find interesting? What do you genuinely love about this work?
I think it's going to be a bizarre answer, but I'm very interested in deviant behavior. People were given a set of rules of governance and stuff. I'm interested in the people that don't follow the rules. The reason for that and the reason why that excites me is because that's who we're building the rules for. And then you need to understand them and you need to understand how you can change their minds. And what I found is that most of the time people don't follow rules not because they don't want to. Sometimes it's more difficult to follow the rule. So that's why people choose the easier route. And while all of the security experts could be thinking, no, these people are deviant or they are deliberately going against all the rules that have been set, where the answer could be just if you just altered or made the rule much more easier to follow, that will be your solution. I'll give you an example of this is a lot of work that we do is information security awareness in organizations where you have to spread the good word of awareness. And if you're going to make your awareness session on a Friday at 3:30, people are not going to come. And it's not because they have a personal vendetta against awareness training, but it's because you have put it in a convenient time. But if you're going to make it at a time slot and also at a venue or in a place where people are already gathered, you find that people are more willing and welcome or welcoming of your message. So that's exciting to understand why people don't follow the rules and then to build better controls so that they do.
Awesome, Tilani. That's quite impactful. And you talked about Friday evening. We'll get to that in a second. But now that we have come to meet our panelists, it's also important for me to say August is International Women's Day in South Africa. And that is why we have brought together amazing minds out of South Africa to really lead this panel in support of this initiative. And our original moderator, Koki, cannot be with us today. However, she sent a quote and I wanted to read it. It says, Africa's digital expansion depends on the visible expertise of her women. Allow that to sink in while we get into this conversation with these brilliant minds. So, for the remainder of the session, imagine that the four of us are sitting inside the same organization, XZ. Our panelists haven't been given, the perfect information. So information will be unfolding and we will be triaging together, putting them on the hot seat. And we will also be requiring you to participate along as we uncover our decision cards and putting out a poll there. We'll reveal new information as we go along and see. The whole idea is what's the thinking pattern, what's the rationale behind the decisions. And it's very important to hear from our panelists, but also to get your own perspective in the room. Use the chat function. We are looking at it as we go along, because you never know, you might also influence us differently as we go through this scenario. And so, like 𝗕𝗏𝘆 had mentioned, it is Friday afternoon, 4:20 p.m., that inconvenient time that nobody wants to do anything. And you work for XZ Financial Group. This is the fictional financial services company operating across several African countries. This organization serves approximately 2.5 million customers through its digital banking and other financial services. At 4:20, like I mentioned, the Security Operations Center detects unusual outbound traffic from an environment containing customer information. Now the DPOs in the room should wake up. Initial investigations suggest that an unusual actor may have obtained access to a privileged account. The affected environment contains customer names, national identification numbers, telephone numbers, email addresses, account information, transaction-related information. At this stage, you don't know how the attacker entered. You don't know how long they've been inside the environment. You don't even know whether this personal information has actually been infiltrated. Let's look at the first decision card on the screen. So we would have the decision card pop up for us to vote. What is the priority? What is the organization's immediate priority? What's your thought? Is it shut down the affected environment immediately? Is it B, preserve evidence and investigate before taking disruptive action? Should we be notifying executive leadership and wait for direction? Should we activate the incident response process and make containment decisions through the designated response? Your call. Make your vote in the poll. What do you think? I will be voting as well, so please engage as we go along. So let's hear from the people who would actually be sitting around the table. 𝗕𝗏𝘆, I'll bring you up now. You received the call. What happens in the first 30 minutes? What will be your action item?
The first 30 seconds, I will cry. After that, you need to activate your incident response plan. That is the key, because you've prepared for this moment. That's very important, that a breach or response to a breach doesn't start the second the breach happens. It happens, you have to be prepared for it. So that's your first step, activation of your incident response plan. Then you need to establish the facts. What actually has happened? Yes, you hear that we have a privileged account, but you need to understand what is known, the facts of what is known, so that you can distinguish that from what is unknown. Very important, we do containment. We need to close where it's bleeding, and then understand how far we are bleeding. And then very important, we do not switch off systems. That's because that's how you lose information, and information that can be very relevant in your incident response process.
Awesome. This is very important. We need to first understand that we should have a plan. And for those of you on this call, next month we will be looking at before the breach. Today we're looking at the breach after the fact, but next month we'll be looking at before the breach and how you can proactively plan. And that is why 𝗕𝗏𝘆 has said she's going to invoke the plan. And next, what are the facts that we have? This is not the time for hypothesis, escalating, or hyping any issues. We need to know and ensure that we can stop the bleeding while we heal the wound. We're not shutting off any system so we can preserve evidence. Thank you, 𝗕𝗏𝘆, for that. You've got to be prepared under pressure. So Zubeida, next up to you. At this point within the organization, there are more questions than answers. What data or telemetry would you want in front of you before making a major decision? What would that be?
So before I get to that, I just want to add on one thing to what 𝗕𝗏𝘆 said about the incident response plan and how it covers the other options. So, you had a couple of good options there, A, B, C, D, about containment and stuff. And these options are actually documented and covered in the incident response process. So I just wanted to preface by saying that this is why you jump right into activating that process. Okay, so over back to your question.
Before you go ahead, Zubeida, we can see that our participants are all in alignment with 𝗕𝗏𝘆. So that's awesome. Take it away, Zubeida.
Yeah, it is. It's awesome, yeah. And then, at this point, as a person that works with data and logs, I'd have so many more questions than answers still. What I'd want to know first and foremost is like, what is the identity trail here? So which account did the person or the attacker or whoever it was come into? So was it a privileged access, or, how did they get in? And secondly, I think very important is to look at, where the data was exfiltrated or exported. So let's have a look at the network itself to see if there was any egress, to see if stuff was sent out, if a lot of stuff was sent out, if a little stuff was sent out, let's look at that. And then I'd also want to look at maybe the patterns they used to access this. Did they use certain queries, or, how did they do it? So still a lot of questions right now. And most importantly, I would also want to know, is the data giving me a true, accurate representation? Could it be that I had some agents or some tools that were offline and I still don't have the full picture of the thing? I could be only having half a story at this point.
Interesting. Thank you, Zubeida, for that, because we need to know what we know and we need to know our unknowns, which is very important. So at this point, we don't have all the answers. Zubeida is still digging in to getting out more facts, looking through the telemetry, looking through logs. But this is a dynamic scenario. Security calls legal and says, 𝗕𝗏𝘆, this is you. We think customer data may have been accessed. What's your first question?
I immediately put down my glass of wine and I realized, I must say, about Friday afternoon, I thought the higher up you get, the better it gets, but the more the Friday afternoon means nothing. It's just business as usual. So I think the ladies have also touched on some of the important things I do: activating the response framework, getting the right stakeholders in the room. And really why I would be in doing that is to assess the regulatory obligations which arise, because those timelines tend to be very tight. So knowing what we know, knowing what we don't know, assessing that against any regulatory obligations that exist, understanding whether there are any third-party providers with which we have a relationship that are also implicated by this breach. Those would obviously be outside of our organization. We would also need to get in touch with them, get them in the room, get their understanding of the facts and anything that has taken place to date. And the communication layer is also very important for us at this stage, because we are also trying to establish whether legal privilege may be required in our communications. And so it's very important that the way in which we communicate both internally and with our external stakeholders, we maintain that thread of legal privilege in order to protect the organization reputationally from risk, while still balancing our responsibilities as a corporate citizen and to our regulators. So a lot of fact finding, information finding, but doing so within the parameters of what is permitted and what is legal at that time.
That's awesome, Mpho, because this is one incident. I'll call it an incident right now. This is one incident, and we can see the different perspective everyone is coming at this. This is truly cross-functional, and everyone brings in their perspective to the table. The key question, we have deliberately not brought in a DPO in the room today. Where should the DPO be at this time? Anyone can take that away.
I'll give it a stab. So, I really think it is important for the DPO to remain in the room with security, with legal, with the executive stakeholders, because they have the important job of, as the facts are coming to life, of assessing in real time what those regulatory obligations are, who impacted individuals are in terms of data subjects, and doing that real time analysis as things unfold. So while I don't think they necessarily need to own the process, they very much need to be working and engaging very closely with the response team as the facts are unfolding and guiding them appropriately.
That's
Yeah,
that's
just
absolutely. Go ahead.
oh, that's I just would add on. Yeah, I think that oversight is super important, and we'll speak about it a little bit later. But the DPO is really going to guide the teams in terms of what not to do, because I think there is a lot that the technical teams and the management team shouldn't do, like prematurely sending out communication and stuff. So we will get into that, but I think the DPO really needs to be in the room for oversight. And also, I think sometimes to be that bridge between, what the technical stuff means and how that really, what it really means in human terminology for the organization. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Tulani, I will come to you in 1 second. But we've clearly established that the DPO should be inside the incident response process very early. The key function here, DPOs, is to remember that as this begins to unpack, we already have an asset of interest, the assets that we're looking at that may have been compromised. So the core here is to translate this technical fact into privacy consequences. That should be established understanding, just like Mpho and Zubeida has mentioned, who got affected, what personal information are we looking at, determining regulatory thresholds. Those are full-time roles that the DPO should be spending their time on. Tulani, I'll come to you. What is one thing the DPO could do at this stage that would actually make security's job harder?
Inflating the actual risk, or not, if they don't understand what the breach of specific information means. During a security incident, sometimes it's not just one place that is bleeding, and sometimes we need to be able to prioritize. So if the DPO doesn't have an understanding of the impact of each of the data types, we will find ourselves trying to spread ourselves thin, and everything will be an emergency. What we need from them is a very practical and realistic understanding of what each piece of information means, very accurately, for them to be calm and explain to us the consequences of a breach of each type of information. Yeah.
We can see that when it comes to incident, Tulani, you put it clearly. This is not a time to panic. This is not a time to overly exert yourself and distract, because at this time, we're probably all in the war room trying to resolve and get as much information as we can get. So there is a level of maturity that is expected from the DPO as we coordinate and collaborate to address this issue. So well put. And so we're looking at this incident and it's unfolding. 45 minutes later, forensic reveals even more because, you know, forensic analysis is ongoing. We need to know more. We've seen that the compromised privilege account appears to have been accessed approximately 3 weeks ago. There's evidence of large data transfer. Zubaida had talked about egress, what's going on. We've now seen evidence of large data transfer. Investigators cannot yet conclusively determine exactly what was taken. Meanwhile, the CEO has been briefed. And the first question is, do we have a data breach? Before we bring in our panelists, let's bring in our decision card too to see what you think. Do we begin regulatory notification now? A, do you think it's yes, there's enough evidence of potential compromise? No, wait until forensic investigation confirms exactly what happened. C, notify only the regulators in the organization's primary jurisdiction. D, begin the regulatory assessment now. Notification decisions depend on the applicable law, risk, and established facts. What are your take? Let's give in some time for people to take the poll. The poll is not active now. Could we bring in the poll? So that being said, let's move along. If the poll is not coming up, I don't see it. You are sitting, now this will come to 𝗕𝗄 right now because you're sitting with incomplete information and potentially multiple jurisdiction. How do you advise the organization? At what point does cybersecurity incident becomes a legal or privacy breach?
I think this is the stage where it becomes very, very important to remain calm. I think the propensity to sensationalize what is happening now would rise a little bit more than when we have found out about the incident. And so I think the necessary steps that would follow would be doing that investigation into exactly which types of data might have been leaked and continuing to engage with the response team around what is out there, what we know, what we don't know, the categories of data, what security is unearthing. So I would continue with an assessment, with an investigation, until we can clearly map out knowns and unknowns for that team and escalate that up within the organization as it's already reached that CEO level. And another thing that you touched on was cyber incidents versus a data breach. I think it becomes very important to distinguish between the two because not every cyber incident is a data breach. And so until we can establish that definitively, understand all the inherent risks that exist, understand what the applicable law says around what we have discovered, it's important to not proceed with impulsivity, but rather have all the facts on the table, have all the relevant stakeholders in the room with the facts on the table before then making a decision to then proceed with the notification.
So 𝗕𝗄, participants have chosen option D, begin regulatory assessment now. Notification decisions depend on applicable laws, risk, and established fact. Would you agree with them? Most of our participants chose that.
Yes, I would.
Awesome.
110%.
We seem to be all aligned. The participants, the panelists, this is great. I love it, at least for our continent. I love it. So let's keep going. Tulani, we're bringing you in now. Legal wants answers, just like 𝗕𝗄 has mentioned. What can security reasonably tell legal at this stage? Because communication is critical during an incident response process.
I think Paul touched on it. We need to tell legal what we do know. We need to explain what we don't know. And then we need to also explain a little bit of the risks of what we do know. So like Paul said, very, very important is to establish the facts and communicate just the facts. But to the answer, has there been a data breach? We answer the evidence and then carry on. So you need to look at what evidence you've gathered and don't speculate, and then speak to that.
That's truly awesome. But one key question I wanted to ask you, Ṱelani, here is, in the heat of pressure, how do you manage staying with the fact without satisfying the curiosity of those in the room?
I think when I spoke about the preparation, right? You prepare for incidents in a similar manner. So you create real world type incidents and you learn to keep calm. Keeping calm could be literally one of the key things that get you through an incident. Then, in order for you to not fall on the trap of having to answer immediately or trying to give out answers that will get people to just go away, you need to know that the consequences of everything that you say, right? So if I were to go to Mpho and say, listen, Mpho, there's been a data breach, but it's not that big, Mpho is going to make her decision based on what I said. And if we under respond, it will be my fault because I had given her inaccurate information. So that's why it's important to keep to the facts so that the organization and everybody that's making a decision around this can make the appropriate decision for us to get through the incident.
Awesome. I love what you've said. We cannot optimize for comfort over staying true to the critical data and to the fact. And again, I'll go back to maturity. And I love what Ṱelani had mentioned. You've got to test this. You've got to practice this. You've got to have conversation, build relationships with your key stakeholders so they know that when you say something, this is what we know at today and this is what we're still uncovering. Zubeida, what should the organization be looking to uncover even at this time? What data should we be looking to continue to capture?
Yes. So also just what Mpho said about data breaches and attacks, right? It's not necessarily at the get-go a data breach. And I think it's important that we recognize why we keep using these terms, attack and data breach, interchangeably, especially with us on the African continent. Looking at it statistically, most of our cyber attacks do result in a data breach. So, this is where we do tend to focus all our efforts on. I mean, we have valuable information, right? And then in terms of, let's look at the logs and let's try to advise cybersecurity, what we have right now. What we could probably see right now from our operational data is we can see that, yes, something happened. We can probably see whose account was used and maybe a little bit of the blast radius. So, maybe it's user XYZ, but we also know that user XYZ has interacted with so-and-so servers and other users. But I think it's also important to acknowledge, and this is where Ṱelani and Paul will come in, what we don't know yet. So we don't really know the impact. We don't really know if the 2.5 million customers, if their data is actually breached or not. It could be that some of our test servers were accessed. It just could be, like, that would be amazing, right? We also don't know what did the attacker want to do, and this is where our frameworks come in later. So we don't know, did the attacker really want to take data, or was there something bigger at the back of their mind? Was it like maybe espionage? There's lots of different motivations and intent. So we really don't know this at this stage. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So one key thing we should also be thinking about right now is, yes, all of these things are important, and also trying to uncover the motivation of the attackers can also help us in resolving this incident. But the key question for DPOs on the call is, what should the DPO be documenting? Because you are in the room, you're not just passive in the room. There are actions that a DPO ought to be doing. So what should a DPO be documenting at this point? Anyone wants to take a stab at that?
I think I'll go. They should be documenting what data is presumed breached, even how the data is stored. Because like 𝗕𝗍𝗲 said, it could be that all the data is encrypted. So that could also be an element where the impact is now a bit different, as opposed to having obtained clear text data being encrypted. Then they should be documenting the impact in terms of the scale. How many records do they believe has been accessed?
That's a really critical response for our DPOs in the room, because right now you should document the factual basis for the assessment. The number of, and this is not the time to understand what is in that particular server, the particular environment that is being investigated. If you have done all of your privacy assessment very early on, you should be aware of what environment we're dealing with, what type of data, applicable jurisdiction where our customers are coming from, understanding your risk analysis. You want to be updating or even reviewing them at this point in time. And if there are any decisions we have to make around notification, we have to go back and continue to review these. So thanks a lot, Tulani, for that. Anybody wants to chime in on that?
Yes, please.
Any other person? Go ahead.
I would also document as the DPO any actions that our security teams might have taken regarding containment and trying to get ahead of the situation. Because from a liability point of view, we may need to demonstrate that we have acted reasonably, we've acted promptly, we did as much as we could to mitigate loss to ourselves firstly, any third parties which are affected, and more especially any data subjects which might be affected. And so those initial steps that we take, we would need to document them because we may need to rely on them in the future.
This is awesome, Mpo. Similar to what Tulani had mentioned. Look, next month we will be looking at before the breach, but now we are hearing beyond the breach. This is what we ought to be documenting. This is not a time to bring out a blank sheet and begin documentation. You should have your template and you should be feeding into that as a forcing function to stay disciplined on documentation. So keep that in mind as we continue to build this process. We're at the point of notification because we've seen reasonable evidence. Who decides whether notification is required? Is it security? Is it the DPO? Is it legal? Is it the CEO? Is it the board? Who decides? And what happens when those functions disagree? What happens?
It's a business. So this is a concept that us security and privacy professionals need to always have in mind. We are hired to support a business. We are not the business. We are not the stars. We support the stars. So decisions that impact business must be done by the business. So it is the CEOs, your boards. Those are the people that decide on if now it is time to do the communications and so forth.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. Any other person has a different opinion, or you're giving a thumbs up
not
to that?
different, but just to add on, yes, I agree with Tulani. The business does make this decision, but it's also going to be the person with the loudest voice in the room or with the most compelling, let's say, case. Because we know that our CEOs would ask for advice. They've hired us, as Tulani says. So they'd want to hear our case on when, certain things should be activated. So there'd certainly be, key stakeholders in the room together. Ultimately, the CEO or the business people would make that decision, but that would be based on the evidence and facts and the cases that all of us present, whether we're from the cybersecurity incident team or the legal team, or wherever we may sit, they would just listen to the one with the most compelling story. Yeah.
Mpho, I know you wanted to say something, but 𝗕𝗿𝗲 has made a very important point
Sorry.
here. Yeah. I don't want anyone to lose this point, because it's not about the trainings you've attended. It's not about being technically sound. You also need to understand organizational dynamics, and some people will call it organizational politics. You care about the business. You care about the people that you're there to serve and protect. So you need to understand communication. And when I speak to regulators, I say, it's not enough to do this training. We need to also be able to communicate and ensure that we are also influencing under pressure. So take it away, Mpho, as you give in your thoughts on this.
So 𝗕𝗿𝗍 touched on it quite well when she mentioned that we are a support function.
Yes.
Our role is to support the business. Our role is to interpret the law and demonstrate the guidelines that are there to hold the business accountable as they conduct their business. Now, that being said, 𝗕𝗿𝗍 raises a very valid point about organizational dynamics and how it can often be, because it may be that, legal compliance and the DPO feel very strongly about a particular decision. However, it is not a territorial decision. I think the decision needs to be largely collaborative. And in an ideal environment, we would then guide the business, guide the CEO on the facts that exist as at the time of the breach, and what the regulatory framework says about what then needs to happen. That being said, I think ultimately the decision needs to come from the leadership within the organization. However, as legal, as compliance, as the DPO, it is also our responsibility to hold the leadership accountable, even within that room, and ensure, that from a governance perspective, we can really say we have acted in a responsible manner.
Awesome. Thulani, chime in here, because I wanted to also speak about a point you raised at the beginning. Take it away, Thulani. Thank you, Mpho, for that.
I definitely agree with both ladies, but I want to give you an example of why this becomes a business decision. Let's say I have a company and my company is called Footbook, right? And I know that I have a lot of money. And I know that data breaches, I can withstand the fines. But what I cannot withstand is if my business gets taken down, because my business I make money through people engaging in my business. Correct? So I can withstand a regulator fine. I can withstand a little bit of bad publicity, right? As opposed to if I am a bank. A bank's reputation that's the most important thing. So maybe I cannot actually withstand regulatory scrutiny or fines like that. That's why I say that if you understand the business, you'll understand your risk, and your decision as to how you react or to the facts that are being given to you by your support functions. That's how it becomes different. I hope I'm making sense.
Yes, two things. Back to what you've just said and what you said previously. The first is context really matters, and your organization determines, your risk tolerance. And as DPOs, as professionals, we need to fundamentally understand that. I know we go to school to go become specialists, but when you work in the business, that's the first assignment. Understand your operating environment. And secondly, when it comes to decision, just like Thulani had said, let's pull out our incident response plan. In that plan, you should have decided who makes the call, so that when we get to this point, we're not doing a round robin on who makes that call. It should be decided, and that individual should rely on the fact of other practitioners in the room. That being said, this incident is far from over, as all incidents, right? So this incident is no longer private. We are in the room. But look, at 6 p.m., the situation really changes. Customer service reports several calls from customers claiming they have received suspicious messages containing personal information. A journalist emails corporate communication. Remember, we don't have corporate communications in the room. And this is what the email says. We understand XZ Financial Group has suffered a major cyber attack exposing customer data. Can you confirm? As we are getting this email, screenshots is appearing on social media. One of our executives has sent a message to the leadership group and says, this is spreading. We need to say something immediately. Let's bring up decision card number 3. And participants, we want to hear your take before we bring in the panelists. Should the organization make a public statement? What's your take, given all that we've discussed and all that we know? Option A, yes, immediately acknowledge the breach. B, no, say nothing until the investigation is complete. C, confirm that an incident is under investigation without speculating about impact. D, contact affected customers first before making any public statement. What's your take? The poll is out. Please submit your poll. As we're thinking through this, now our technical problem has become a trust problem because our stakeholders are waiting on us. Umpo, I will bring you in here from a legal perspective. How do you balance transparency, accuracy, and legal exposure? What language would concern you at this point?
I'm tempted to say we will neither confirm nor deny, but I don't think that would be an appropriate response in this instance. So, and this is a very critical moment because you've spoken about trust, right? And we are in a moment where we are compromised, and I think maintaining trust publicly is very important at this stage. And so I think it becomes very important to not give anything that would lead to further speculation, but rather speak only to confirmed facts that we have established. So do not give more than you need to, acknowledging, as I think it was C says, that yes, there is an incident, but we are still investigating and we are still collating details related to the incident. So communicating anything too prematurely is not advisable. Speculating or making, firm or hard statements around things which are not yet confirmed could also erode the trust in your organization, because if the facts later come out that you had said something had occurred when it in fact had not, that reputationally could really affect your organization. So stick to what you know, which is that an incident has occurred and we are investigating further. We will be in touch. Less is more in this instance.
Awesome. That's a really good one. And it's good when we do this in a simulated environment. You need to build your muscle to really stick with less, which is very important. But Mpo, I'll still keep you on, because while you lean towards C, and we see that 47% of our participants have selected C, which seems aligned with your thinking. We have 53% that says contact customer first before making any public statement. Why will that be an issue?
Oh, I really do think that might be a can of worms, because again, with the customers that are potentially affected, we are not yet in a position to state definitively what has been disclosed and what has been, breached and what hasn't. It may very well be that it is data pertaining to them, but which is not capable of identifying them. And then you've gone and you've rung an alarm before having a full set of information. And I still think I would stick to C on this one, because I also feel like with D, it's okay. I will keep it at that for now.
Yeah. Any other person, and that is really good because Tulani would have you on. The question becomes, if you want to reach out to your customers, what are you telling them? That's a very important question too. And what types of customers do you have? Because you really need to understand how will this impact them when you do not have all the. Tulani, please take it away.
I want to speak to why D could not be the optimal answer.
I love it.
Everything that you do within an incident response you have to then give this information to regulators. And the regulators make judgment on your actions. So like 𝗕𝗿𝗄 has said, you could communicate something that's untruthful to your customers because you are communicating at an early stage of the incident. And that could lead to consequences months down the line when the regulators do the investigations.
So, to all our panelists, who owns the communication? Is it legal? Is it corporate communication, privacy, security? Is it the CEO? Who makes the call? Who owns the communication? This is a very crucial question that needs to be answered. Who decides what communications goes out there? Or should security be involved in the response? Should legal be involved? Because we have to communicate, but who decides that? 𝗕𝗿𝗄 has told us, yes, we want to say we are still investigating. We confirm the incident is still under investigation without speculating about the impact. Who should be signing off on this messaging?
This is where you lean on your preparedness. Most of the times, communication should already have templates drafted for these types of incidents. So these have already been agreed upon. I think the business has final sign-off, so the CEO has the final sign-off, but the structure of the message, the amount of information that's given out, that's all decided on when we do our preparation activities.
And so, Zubeida, what if legal wants to say less, just as part of the room, legal wants to say less, like 𝗕𝗿𝗄 had mentioned, communications want to say more, and security says, we don't know what, how do we break that tension?
So I think what Tulani said is accurate, right? This would have been defined already, I think, in phase 0 of our best practice frameworks when we are preparing plans and stuff. But it could still come down to the stage where different people want to start that communication. But you need to be honest to say that if you give a premature communication, and then 2 weeks or a month later, the logs or the evidence are contradicting to what you've pushed out publicly in your statement, the consequences and the repercussions are real. So I think we all would be in agreement, even as security people, that we need to stick to the facts here, by saying that we are just investigating whether something has happened or not. If you say the opposite way, if you say nothing has happened, we're all fine, you can still get in trouble because your logs, your forensic evidence will show something happened. But as the lady said, if you say, yes, we've been breached, and you contact customers directly, you'd cause widespread panic, and then there'd be other issues because actually the customers were not affected, and you can't get away from that reputational damage you would have already done.
This is awesome. If there is one thing we have to establish at the end of this conversation is, like you said, plan 0. We need to do this regular tabletop because we need to be of the same mindset. Trust me, this room is the brilliant minds on the continent. However, within our organization, people may have differing opinions. People may have different incentives. And so we need to ensure alignment before we have an actual incident. So this is very important to continue to communicate, even before an actual incident. Again, this is far from over. It is 6:30 right now. The board calls. The board requests for an emergency briefing. You all have 15 minutes to prepare. Zubeida, 𝗕𝗿𝗆, you have 15 minutes to prepare for this call. The chair of the board is asking 5 questions. What happened? Are we still compromised? What information has been affected? What are our regulatory obligations? What should we expect over the next 24 hours? We know that there are still gaps in the investigation. As you all prepare your response to come into the boardroom, we want to bring in our decision card for participants. You also are on the hot seat. What should leadership tell the board? A, confirm only the facts. B, the worst case scenario so the board understands the exposure. C, confirmed facts, known unknowns, current actions, decisions required, and next update. Or D, wait until the investigation is more mature before briefing the board. That's if you have the luxury for that. What's your take? So we have our participants polling in on this. So while we have that, we'll bring in our panelists back. You have, say, 2 minutes or less with the board. I really need to know. Let's start with you, 𝗕𝗏𝘆, from security. What does the board need to understand about containment and technical risk at this point?
I think the theme that we as in all the panelists, stays constant. We need to know, we need to explain to the board what has happened, keeping to the facts. We need to then explain to them what we currently don't know. Then we need to list all the actions that we've taken until then. And very importantly, we need to let them understand the risk of both what has happened and the risk of the actions we've taken, and also the risks of us not taking any action. That's also important. And then we need to then give them an approximation of when would we have more information, and then we give them perhaps a date of, not a date, a time of the next update, and then also reassure them that if something significant or if something changes in the situation, we'll give them an update.
So there's a communication channel now being open to the board, which is excellent. Zubeida, next up, security intelligence. What